An American can work for 40 years, pay every tax, contribute to a retirement account, and do everything the system asked, only to discover that the final promise depends on Congress, demographics, financial markets, inflation, local budgets, and the integrity of people managing trillions of dollars. That is the uncomfortable truth behind America's retirement system. In this episode, we will answer the questions that millions of workers are quietly beginning to ask. Is Social Security actually running out of money? What happens if its trust fund reserves are depleted? Can a state or city pension fail? Who pays when a retirement plan falls short? And how did money meant for teachers, police officers, firefighters, transit workers, and other public employees become entangled in political influence and corruption? To understand the danger, we must begin with the most important retirement program in the United States: Social Security. Social Security is often described as if every worker has a personal federal savings account somewhere in Washington. You pay into it for decades. The government stores your money. Then, when you retire, it gives that same money back. But that is not how the system works. Social Security is primarily a social insurance program financed on a current basis. Payroll taxes collected from today's workers and employers are used largely to pay benefits to today's retirees, disabled workers, survivors, and eligible family members. For most employees, 6.2% of covered wages is collected for Social Security, and the employer contributes another 6.2% up to the annual taxable earnings limit. Self-employed workers generally pay both shares. Those taxes do not enter an individual investment portfolio bearing the worker's name. They flow into a national system built around a shared promise between generations. Current workers support current beneficiaries. Future workers are expected to support the next generation of beneficiaries. For many decades, Social Security collected more in taxes and other income than it needed to pay annual benefits. The excess was invested in special issue United States Treasury securities and accumulated in two legally separate trust funds. The first is the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, known as OASI. It pays retirement and survivors' benefits. The second is the Disability Insurance Trust Fund, known as DI. It supports eligible disabled workers and their families. Together, they are commonly discussed as OASDI. These reserves were never an endless mountain of cash. They were a buffer, built during years when program income exceeded program costs and available to help cover benefits when costs became greater than incoming revenue. That reversal has already happened. Social Security has paid more in annual costs than it received from non-interest income since 2010. Total costs, including benefit payments and administration, began exceeding total income, including interest, in 2021. And the trustees project that total costs will remain higher than total income. The reserves are therefore declining. This is where the public conversation often becomes misleading. You will hear that Social Security is going bankrupt. You will hear that the program will be gone. You may even hear that younger Americans will receive nothing. Those statements confuse trust fund depletion with the disappearance of the entire program. Even if the reserves were exhausted, workers and employers would still be paying payroll taxes. Social Security would continue receiving dedicated revenue. The program would not suddenly have zero income. But that continuing income would not be enough to pay every scheduled benefit in full. And the newest official numbers are serious. The 2026 Social Security Trustees Report projects that the OASI Trust Fund, the fund responsible for retirement and survivors' benefits, will deplete its reserves in the fourth quarter of 2032. At that point, if Congress had made no changes, continuing income would be sufficient to pay approximately 78% of scheduled OASI benefits. The Disability Insurance Trust Fund is in a much stronger position. Under the trustees' intermediate projections, DI reserves remain positive throughout the entire 75-year projection period, from 2026 through 2100. The two funds are legally separate. Money cannot simply be transferred between them without legislation. However, analysts frequently show them on a combined hypothetical basis to describe the overall condition of Social Security. On that combined OASDI basis, reserves are projected to be depleted in 2034. Continuing income would then support approximately 83% of total scheduled benefits. That distinction matters. The retirement fund alone faces reserve depletion sooner in 2032, with 78% payable. The combined retirement and disability projection reaches depletion in 2034, with 83% payable. And the disability fund by itself is not projected to run out during the 75-year period. None of this means that benefits are scheduled to disappear. It means that without legislation, a gap develops between what the benefit formulas promise and what the program can legally pay from incoming revenue after reserves are exhausted. A benefit scheduled under the formula is not necessarily the same as a benefit payable with available funds. For a retiree depending heavily on Social Security, the difference between 100% and 78% is not an abstract accounting adjustment. It may be the grocery budget, the rent, the property tax payment, the electricity bill, the prescription that cannot be postponed. And because millions of retirees have limited ability to return to full-time work, they cannot easily repair a sudden loss of income. Why is the gap developed? The answer is not one single villain, one administration, or one political party. It is a long-term collision between demographics and arithmetic. In 2025, there were approximately 2.6 covered workers for every Social Security beneficiary. During much of the period from the mid-1970s through 2008, the ratio remained between roughly 3.2 and 3.4 workers per beneficiary. The trustees project that it will fall toward approximately 1.9 workers per beneficiary by 2075. That means fewer workers supporting each person receiving benefits. The large baby boom generation has moved into retirement. Birth rates have declined. Growth in the working age population has slowed. People reaching retirement may collect benefits for many years, while the number of workers contributing to the system does not rise at the same pace. Longer retirement periods are, in human terms, a success. More people surviving into old age is not a national failure. But a retirement system must finance the years it promises to support. The problem is not that Americans are living too long. The problem is that the structure must adapt when the relationship among workers, beneficiaries, wages, birth rates, immigration, and life expectancy changes. Social Security also faces a political problem. The warning has not arrived suddenly. Trustees, economists, lawmakers, and policy organizations have discussed the long-term financing gap for decades. The arithmetic has changed from report to report, but the central warning has remained. Eventually, scheduled benefits will exceed what dedicated revenue can support unless the law changes. Yet reform is repeatedly delayed because every realistic option creates visible political pain. Congress could increase the payroll tax rate. That would produce more revenue, but it would reduce take-home pay or raise employment costs. Congress could raise or redesign the taxable wage cap so that more earnings are subject to Social Security taxes. That would concentrate more of the burden on higher earners. But the details would determine how much revenue is raised and how the relationship between contributions and future benefits changes. Congress could reduce scheduled benefits. That could improve solvency, but the effect would depend on whether reductions apply to current retirees, future retirees, higher earners, or everyone. Congress could change the full retirement age or other eligibility rules. But telling people to work longer does not affect every American equally. A professional working at a desk may be able to remain employed into the late 60s or 70s. A construction worker, nursing aide, factory employee, firefighter, or person with serious health limitations may not have the same option. Life expectancy also varies substantially across income groups and communities. A later retirement age can therefore impose a heavier burden on people whose working lives are physically demanding or whose expected retirement is shorter. Congress could use additional general federal revenue. That would reduce dependence on payroll taxes, but it would connect Social Security more directly to the broader federal budget, deficits, debt, and competition with other public priorities. Lawmakers could combine several reforms, protect lower-income retirees, phase changes in slowly, and distribute the burden across taxes, benefits, ages, and generations. But there is no combination that allows everyone to receive more, pay less, retire earlier, and transfer no cost to the future. The trustees' arithmetic illustrates the price of delay. Under the 2026 projections, restoring long-term balance immediately through payroll taxes alone would require raising the combined payroll tax rate from 12.4% to roughly 16.65%. Restoring balance immediately through benefits alone would require an immediate reduction of approximately 1/4 for all current and future beneficiaries. Those are not policy recommendations. They are illustrations of the size of the financing gap, and waiting makes the adjustment more concentrated. If action were postponed until the projected combined reserve depletion in 2034, the tax increase or benefit reduction required to restore 75-year solvency would be larger than if reform began in 2026. Delay feels painless because the invoice has not yet arrived. But delay is not neutrality. It is a decision to send a larger bill to fewer workers and fewer generations later. This is where a Churchillian strategic mind might look past the comforting slogans and ask a harsher question. What is the purpose of political leadership if every difficult decision is postponed until choice has been replaced by emergency? A nation cannot claim to defend a promise merely by refusing to discuss its cost. Real leadership would not declare that Social Security is doomed. That would be theatrical panic, nor would it insist that nothing needs to change. That would be comfortable denial. It would tell Americans the truth while there is still time to spread reforms gradually, protect the most vulnerable, and allow workers to adjust their plans. The danger is not only insolvency on paper. The danger is that elected leaders will wait until reform must be rushed through under pressure. When every option is harsher, public trust is lower, and retirees have less time to prepare. But Social Security is only one pillar of retirement. It was never designed to replace every dollar a person earned while working or to finance every expense of old age. Americans were expected to rely on additional support, an employer pension, personal savings, family resources, home equity, or investments. That wider structure has also changed. Traditional private defined benefit pensions have become less common in much of the corporate workforce. A defined benefit pension promises a formula-based payment, often calculated using years of service, salary, and the plan's rules. The employer generally carries more of the investment and longevity risk. If retirees live longer or investments underperform, the plan sponsor remains responsible for funding the promised benefit, subject to the employer's solvency, pension law, and any applicable insurance limits. Many workers today instead rely on defined contribution accounts such as 401(k)s and 403(b)s. These plans do not promise a specific lifetime income. They provide an account. The final result depends on how much the employee contributes, whether the employer matches those contributions, investment performance, fees, asset allocation, market conditions near retirement, and how quickly the money is withdrawn. The investment risk shifts toward the individual. The longevity risk shifts toward the individual. And the burden of making complex financial decisions often falls on people who are working full-time, raising families, managing debt, and trying to predict a retirement that may still be 30 years away. A 401k balance may look impressive during a strong market, but an account balance is not the same as a guaranteed income for life. A worker retiring during a prolonged downturn may be forced to sell investments while prices are depressed. Early losses combined with regular withdrawals can permanently weaken a portfolio, even if markets recover later. Someone who lives far longer than expected may outlast the assumptions used in the original plan. Someone who becomes ill may face higher healthcare and care-related costs. Someone paying high investment or administrative fees may lose a meaningful share of long-term growth without seeing a dramatic charge on any single statement. And someone who reaches retirement with inadequate savings may discover that Social Security is not a supplemental benefit at all. It is the foundation holding the entire household together. Inflation places pressure on every part of this system. Social Security includes annual cost of living adjustments based on a federal inflation measure. But an official adjustment does not guarantee that every retiree's personal expenses rise at the same rate. Older households may spend disproportionately on housing, healthcare, insurance, utilities, and services whose costs behave differently from the broader consumer basket. A pension without a strong cost of living adjustment can lose purchasing power year after year. A fixed monthly benefit that appears secure in dollars may become steadily weaker in what it can actually buy. Even personal savings face the same threat. Retirement security is not measured by the number printed on an account statement. It is measured by the food, housing, care, transportation, safety, and independence that number can purchase. This is why America's retirement crisis cannot be reduced to one dramatic prediction that Social Security will vanish. The real picture is more complicated. Social Security is expected to continue collecting revenue, but its scheduled promises exceed projected financing. Traditional pensions offer stronger benefit guarantees, but they depend on funding, investment assumptions, employer solvency, and responsible management. Defined contribution accounts offer ownership and flexibility, but place market, fee, withdrawal, and longevity risks on individual workers. Inflation can weaken all of them, and millions of families must somehow assemble these imperfect parts into one stable retirement. America's federal retirement promise faces a mathematical problem, but across its states and cities, pension promises face an additional question. Who is managing the money, and whose interests are they serving? Public pension money rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It sits in portfolios, annual reports, actuarial tables, and investment contracts. It moves through custodians, asset managers, consultants, brokers, private equity funds, real estate partnerships, and bond markets. But behind every dollar is a person. A teacher who spent 30 years in a classroom. A police officer who worked nights and holidays. A firefighter whose body absorbed the cost of the job. A transit worker who began before sunrise. A government employee who accepted lower wages in exchange for the belief that retirement would be secure. Public pension funds exist to serve those people. Yet the enormous pools of capital accumulated in their name can also attract a very different group. Political operatives, financial intermediaries, placement agents, campaign donors, lobbyists, and officials who understand how valuable access to pension money can be. State and local retirement systems collectively control trillions of dollars. They must decide where that money will be invested, who will manage it, who will advise the board, who will hold the assets, who will execute transactions, and which private funds will receive commitments that may remain in place for a decade or longer. Every one of those decisions can generate fees. A contract to manage pension assets may be worth millions of dollars to an investment firm. A private equity commitment can produce management fees year after year, along with a share of investment profits. A brokerage relationship can generate commissions. A custodial contract can provide steady institutional revenue. And because the money belongs to workers and retirees rather than to the officials awarding the contracts, the people making the decisions may not personally suffer when those decisions are poor. This creates a fundamental governance risk. The beneficiaries carry the consequences. The intermediaries collect the fees, and political officials may control access. This is where the term pay to play enters the American pension system. In its clearest form, pay to play describes an arrangement in which an investment firm, executive, employee, lobbyist, or associate provides campaign contributions, gifts, payments, entertainment, or other benefits to someone capable of influencing the award of public financial business. The danger is obvious. A pension contract should be awarded because a firm offers the best combination of skill, cost, risk control, transparency, and service. It should not be awarded because someone funded a political campaign, hired the right intermediary, paid for travel, arranged entertainment, or placed money in the hands of an official. But an important distinction must be made. A political contribution is not automatically a bribe. Investment professionals retain political rights. Campaign donations occur legally every day. The existence of a contribution alone does not prove that a contract was purchased or that a crime occurred. Criminal bribery generally requires evidence of a corrupt exchange. Regulatory pay-to-play rules can operate more broadly. The Securities and Exchange Commission adopted Rule 206(4)(5) to reduce the risk that investment advisors would use political contributions to influence the selection of firms managing public assets. Among other restrictions, the rule can prevent an investment advisor from receiving compensation for services to a government entity for 2 years after certain covered associates make contributions to officials capable of influencing the selection of advisors. The rule is preventive. It does not always require proof that a contribution changed a decision or that an official entered a bribery agreement. That is why a regulatory violation must not be described automatically as a criminal corruption conspiracy. The distinction matters. A civil or administrative settlement is not the same as a criminal conviction. An allegation is not the same as a proven fact. A guilty plea is an admission in criminal court. A jury conviction follows a finding of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And a settlement in which a company neither admits nor denies the regulator's findings has a different legal meaning from all of them. The American pension story contains examples across that entire spectrum. One of the clearest criminal cases emerged from Detroit. Long before the city entered the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history at that time, federal investigators were examining the relationship among city officials, pension trustees, advisors, and businessmen seeking access to retirement system investments. Detroit operated 2 principal retirement systems, one serving general city employees and another serving police officers and firefighters. These funds controlled investment decisions involving hundreds of millions of dollars. Federal prosecutors alleged that individuals seeking pension business provided cash, trips, entertainment, private flights, and other benefits to people connected to those decisions. The case eventually produced multiple guilty pleas, convictions, and prison sentences. Jeffrey Beasley had served as Detroit City Treasurer and, through that office, held influence over the city's pension systems. Federal prosecutors accused him of using that position to solicit and receive bribes and kickbacks from businessmen seeking pension transactions. The arrangements were not limited to a single envelope of cash or a single investment vote. According to the government's case, benefits included money, travel, entertainment, and other personal advantages connected to decisions involving pension assets. Chauncey Mayfield, an investment advisor to Detroit's pension systems, pleaded guilty to conspiring with Beasley to pay bribes in exchange for new pension fund business. The prosecution also involved Ronald Zajac, who had served for decades as general counsel to Detroit's two pension systems, and Paul Stewart, a trustee of the police and fire retirement system. In December 2014, a federal jury convicted Beasley, Zajac, and Stewart of participating in a conspiracy involving bribes and kickbacks connected to pension investment decisions. Beasley was later sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. The government said businessmen who sought and received access to hundreds of millions of dollars in pension transactions had supplied benefits to officials capable of influencing those decisions. The Detroit case demonstrates what pension corruption looks like when fiduciary authority becomes personal currency. The injury is not limited to the precise amount of a bribe. A bribe may be small compared with the investment it influences. A trip costing several $1,000s can affect a decision involving tens or hundreds of millions. The deeper damage is that the selection process itself becomes unreliable. The public can no longer know whether an investment was approved because it served retirees or because it served the people approving it. But the Detroit corruption prosecutions must not be distorted. Corruption did not single-handedly cause Detroit's municipal bankruptcy. The city's financial collapse reflected a much broader combination of population decline, reduced tax revenue, debt, economic restructuring, public service costs, pension liabilities, healthcare obligations, and decades of political and financial decisions. The criminal cases are not a complete explanation for Detroit's fiscal crisis. They are evidence that weak governance can make an already difficult financial situation worse. When a pension system is under pressure, every wasted dollar matters. Every unnecessary fee matters. Every investment chosen for political or personal reasons increases the burden carried by workers, retirees, and taxpayers. A second major case involved the New York State Common Retirement Fund. This is not a minor local plan. The fund serves public workers and retirees across New York and manages one of the largest pools of public retirement assets in the United States. Inside that institution, Navnoor Kang held a powerful position. From 2014 to 2016, he served as Director of Fixed Income and Head of Portfolio Strategy. He was responsible for investment activity involving more than $50 billion in fixed income securities. His obligation was clear. He was required to make decisions for the benefit of the fund's members and beneficiaries, free from undisclosed personal conflicts. Instead, federal prosecutors said Kang accepted secret benefits from brokerage representatives who wanted pension business directed toward their firms. The benefits included travel, expensive meals, entertainment, and other personal advantages. In exchange, Kang steered fixed income trading business toward the brokers providing those benefits. One participant, Deborah Kelly, was a managing director in institutional fixed income sales at a New York broker-dealer. She pleaded guilty to participating in the pay-to-play bribery arrangement. Federal prosecutors said the business directed by Kang generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional commissions for her firm. Kelly was sentenced to 3 years of probation, including 6 months of home confinement. Kang pleaded guilty in November 2017 to conspiracy to commit securities fraud and conspiracy to commit honest services wire fraud. In July 2018, he was sentenced to 21 months in federal prison. Again, the value of the gifts was not the full measure of the harm. The central issue was the sale of access. Pension beneficiaries had the right to expect that brokerage decisions would be based on execution quality, price, service, risk, and the interests of the fund. Instead, the person responsible for those decisions admitted that personal benefits had entered the equation. This is a particularly dangerous form of betrayal because it can hide inside ordinary financial activity. Trades still occur. Reports are still produced. The pension fund continues operating. There may be no dramatic moment when money visibly disappears. The cost can emerge gradually through excess commissions, inferior counterparties, distorted investment choices, or the simple destruction of confidence in the institution. Then there was Ohio. The Ohio case showed that influence risk is not confined to selecting investment managers. It can also reach the less visible infrastructure surrounding pension assets. Public funds require custodians and sub-custodians to hold securities, process transactions, maintain records, and support the movement of money through financial markets. These contracts may sound administrative. They can still be extremely valuable. In 2016, the SEC announced a settled enforcement action involving State Street Bank and Trust Company and its effort to win contracts connected to Ohio pension funds. According to the SEC's findings, a senior State Street executive and a lobbyist participated in arrangements involving political contributions and payments connected to the Ohio Treasurer's Office. The SEC said a purported lobbying agreement was used to direct money to individuals associated with the process, and that campaign contributions were arranged while State Street was competing for the pension business. State Street ultimately received contracts to serve as sub-custodian for 3 Ohio pension funds, generating millions of dollars in revenue. The company agreed to pay approximately $12 million in disgorgement, interest, and civil penalties to resolve the SEC action. This was a regulatory settlement. It should be described as such. The SEC made formal findings, and State Street agreed to the financial resolution and remedial orders. That is legally different from saying that the company was convicted in a criminal trial. Yet the governance lesson remains severe. A pension system can select honest investment managers and still be exposed through consultants, custodians, lobbyists, placement agents, and procurement officials. Every point at which public money meets a private contract creates a potential conflict. Even CalPERS, the California Public Employees Retirement System, one of the largest and most sophisticated public pension institutions in the country, has faced historical corruption inside its leadership. Fred Buenrostro served as CalPERS chief executive. Federal prosecutors said he conspired with former CalPERS board member and placement agent Alfred Villalobos in arrangements involving investment business and placement agent fees. Buenrostro admitted that fraudulent documents were created to help Villalobos obtain fees connected to investments made by CalPERS. The documents concealed important facts about the relationship and created the appearance that required disclosures and approvals had been properly obtained. Buenrostro pleaded guilty to a corruption conspiracy and was sentenced in 2016 to 54 months in federal prison. The misconduct was historical. It does not establish that CalPERS' current leadership participated in it. But the institution's size and professional reputation make the lesson more important, not less. Sophistication does not eliminate governance risk. Large staffs, advanced investment strategies, and respected advisors cannot protect a fund if senior officials can bypass controls, conceal relationships, or falsify documents. Recent SEC actions also demonstrate that pay-to-play compliance remains an active issue. In 2024, the SEC settled separate administrative cases involving Wayzata Investment Partners and Obra Capital Management. In each case, the regulator found that the advisor continued to receive compensation connected to a government entity after a covered associate had made a campaign contribution, triggering the rule's 2-year restriction. Wayzata agreed to a $60,000 civil penalty. Obra agreed to a $95,000 civil penalty. Both firms settled without admitting or denying the SEC's findings. These cases should not be presented as proven bribery conspiracies. The SEC's pay-to-play rule does not require the regulator to demonstrate an actual quid pro quo in every enforcement action. That distinction protects accuracy, but it also explains the purpose of preventive rules. Once a corrupt bargain is proven, the damage has already occurred. The rule attempts to reduce the circumstances in which pension contracts and campaign finance can become dangerously entangled. What, then, protects retirement money? No single reform is enough. Public pension boards require independence, but independence without accountability can become isolation. Beneficiary representatives provide essential knowledge of the people the fund serves, but every trustee must understand fiduciary responsibility. Professional investment staff can reduce dependence on political appointees, but staff must be compensated appropriately, supervised effectively, and protected from improper pressure. Fees must be disclosed clearly. This includes management fees, performance fees, consulting payments, placement agent compensation, transaction costs, and expenses buried inside private investment structures. Procurement should be competitive and documented. Officials should be required to explain why a firm was selected, what alternatives were considered, what fees will be paid, and what conflicts were reviewed. Political contribution controls should identify relationships between contractors, their executives, intermediaries, and officials capable of influencing pension business. External audits should test more than whether the numbers add up. They should examine governance, procurement, conflicts, valuation practices, and compliance with investment policies. Board meetings and important decisions should leave a public record. Conflict of interest rules should apply not only to direct payments, but also to gifts, travel, employment relationships, family connections, charitable arrangements, and benefits delivered through third parties. Whistleblowers need channels that do not place their careers at the mercy of the officials they are reporting. And fiduciary duties must be more than ceremonial language. Every person controlling pension assets should understand that the money is not government property in the ordinary political sense. It does not belong to a mayor. It does not belong to a governor. It does not belong to a union official, a treasurer, a board member, an investment manager, or a campaign. It is held for beneficiaries. A Churchillian strategic view would treat corruption involving retirement money as an especially grave betrayal. Workers near retirement cannot simply begin their careers again. A 30-year-old investor may have decades to recover from fraud, excessive fees, or a failed institution. A 75-year-old pensioner may not. To misuse retirement money is therefore to exploit people at the moment when their ability to recover is weakest. But corruption is only one danger. A bribe can distort an investment. A conflict of interest can inflate a fee. Poor oversight can allow both to continue. Yet even the most ethical pension board in America cannot command markets to rise. It cannot prevent a population from aging. It cannot erase inflation. And it cannot make benefits affordable merely by choosing assumptions that postpone recognition of their cost. Corruption can steal from a pension fund, poor governance can weaken it, but even a completely honest pension board cannot repeal demographics, inflation, or unrealistic promises. When a retirement promise falls short, the money does not disappear into an accounting formula. The cost moves. It moves to workers through higher contributions. It moves to retirees through weaker benefits or lost purchasing power. It moves to taxpayers through larger public payments. It moves to employers through rising pension expenses. It moves to younger generations through debt, reduced services, and obligations they had no role in creating. Someone always pays. The political argument is usually about deciding who that someone will be. For American workers, the first risk is that retirement becomes more expensive long before retirement actually begins. A future Social Security agreement could require higher payroll taxes. State and local employees may be asked to contribute a greater share of each paycheck to their pension plans. Employers facing growing retirement costs may limit wage increases, reduce hiring, or change benefits for new employees. Workers can also be told to wait longer. Raising retirement ages is often presented as a simple response to longer life expectancy. If people live longer, the argument goes, they should work longer. But averages conceal enormous differences. A healthy professional with control over working hours may be able to remain employed into the late 60s. A firefighter, paramedic, sanitation worker, construction worker, nurse, warehouse employee, or transit operator may reach the same age with a body already shaped by decades of physical work. A higher retirement age does not ask the same sacrifice from every occupation. It also does not affect every income group equally. People with higher incomes tend to have greater financial flexibility, more savings, and often longer life expectancy. Lower income workers may begin working earlier, perform more demanding jobs, and have fewer opportunities to reduce their hours gradually. A reform that appears equal on paper can therefore impose very unequal costs in real life. Younger Americans face another burden. They are expected to help finance benefits for current retirees while simultaneously building more of their own retirement security through 401ks, IRAs, home equity, and personal savings. They are asked to trust the public system while preparing for the possibility that the public system will provide less than scheduled. That is not an argument against Social Security. It is an explanation of why political delay creates anxiety even when the program continues paying benefits. The longer lawmakers refuse to define the future rules, the longer workers must make life-changing financial decisions without knowing what those rules will be. Retirees face a different kind of vulnerability. A person in retirement has fewer ways to recover from a financial shock. A 35-year-old may respond to a loss by changing jobs, saving more, delaying a purchase, or working additional years. An 80-year-old may have none of those options. If retirement income fails to keep pace with living costs, the adjustment happens inside the household. The retiree buys less food, uses less heating or air conditioning, postpones dental care, moves to cheaper housing, depends more heavily on children, or spends down savings that were supposed to last for the rest of life. Even when the dollar amount of a pension never falls, its real value can decline. Inflation is therefore a form of retirement risk that often arrives without an official benefit cut. A monthly pension of $3,000 may continue to be $3,000. But if rent, insurance, healthcare, food, utilities, and transportation rise faster than the pension's cost of living adjustment, the payment supports a smaller life every year. Social Security includes annual cost of living adjustments, but many public and private pensions provide limited adjustments, conditional adjustments, delayed adjustments, or no automatic inflation protection at all. Some public plans have reduced or suspended cost of living increases during periods of financial pressure. Those decisions can generate fierce legal and political battles because they sit at the boundary between two legitimate concerns. Retirees believe they earned a secure benefit through years of service. Governments argue that permanently increasing benefits may worsen liabilities that taxpayers are already struggling to finance. Neither side experiences the dispute as an abstract calculation. For the retiree, it is income. For the government, it is a legal obligation extending decades into the future. Public employees face an especially fragmented system. There is no single American rule governing every teacher, police officer, firefighter, or municipal worker. Pension protections differ by state. In some states, constitutional provisions offer strong protection to accrued pension benefits. In others, protection comes from contract law, statutes, court decisions, or plan documents. The protection afforded to benefits already earned may differ from the protection afforded to benefits employees expect to earn in the future. Cost of living adjustments may receive weaker protection than the core pension formula. New employees may be placed in a different plan from older employees doing the same job. Two teachers with similar careers but working on opposite sides of a state line can therefore face very different retirement outcomes. Some public employees also work in positions not covered by Social Security. They may contribute to a state or local pension instead. That makes the health of the pension plan even more important, because Social Security may not provide the same foundation available to most private sector workers. Recent federal changes repealing the windfall elimination provision and government pension offset have improved Social Security treatment for many public workers who also earned covered benefits through other employment or qualified through a spouse. But repeal of those provisions did not place every state and local employee inside Social Security. Many remain dependent primarily on their public pension and personal savings. For these employees, a plan's vesting rules matter enormously. Someone who completes a full career may receive a substantial lifetime benefit. Someone who leaves after several years may receive far less, even though contributions were deducted from every paycheck. That is why a pension can be valuable for a career employee, but less effective for a worker who changes jobs, relocates, leaves public service to care for family, or does not remain long enough to vest fully. When a public pension plan becomes underfunded, several responses are possible. Employees may be required to contribute more. Governments may increase employer contributions. Benefits for new hires may be reduced. Retirement ages may rise. Cost of living adjustments may be changed. The plan may adopt risk-sharing rules under which workers or retirees absorb part of future financial pressure. The government may extend the period over which pension debt is repaid. Or officials may simply contribute less than actuaries recommend and allow the problem to grow. The consequences then reach taxpayers. Pension contributions compete with every other demand on a public budget. A city paying more toward past pension obligations may have less room for current salaries, road repairs, libraries, emergency services, schools, housing programs, or public transportation. This does not mean that pension payments are wasteful. They are compensation for work already performed. The employee provided labour under an agreement that included future benefits. Refusing to fund that promise does not make its cost disappear. But the timing of the contribution matters. When governments consistently make responsible payments while employees are working, costs are spread across the years in which services are provided. When governments defer payments, the pension debt can remain after the employees have retired and after the officials who avoided the contributions have left office. Future residents are then asked to pay for yesterday's services while also financing today's government. This is the attraction of delay. The service is received immediately. The tax increase is avoided immediately. The political consequences are postponed. But investment returns cannot reliably rescue a plan from repeated underpayment. Markets may help. They may also expose the weakness more clearly. State and local pension systems held approximately $6.85 trillion in assets at the end of 2025. These are not empty institutions waiting for collapse. They are major investors with diversified portfolios containing public stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity, infrastructure, cash, and other assets. National estimates suggest that public pension funding improved modestly in recent years. One widely used projection placed the aggregate funded ratio for state and local plans at approximately 77.7% for fiscal year 2025. But the national average hides enormous variation. Some plans are fully funded or close to it. Others have assets covering only a much smaller portion of estimated liabilities. And even those numbers require careful interpretation. A funded ratio compares the actuarial value of a plan's assets with the estimated present value of its promised benefits. It is not the same as measuring whether the fund could pay every benefit tomorrow. Pensions do not normally owe all future benefits tomorrow. They pay them over decades. A plan with a funded ratio below 100% is therefore not automatically insolvent, bankrupt, or about to stop sending checks. Its condition depends on many factors: the size and timing of future benefits, contribution policies, payroll growth, investment returns, demographic trends, legal protections, and the financial capacity of the sponsoring government. The assumptions matter. Suppose a pension plan expects its investments to earn approximately 7% over the long term. That assumed return affects how much money must be contributed today to finance benefits due many years from now. A higher expected return generally makes the present value of future obligations appear smaller and reduces the contribution required today. If the return proves realistic over time, the system may work as planned. If it is consistently too optimistic, the shortfall eventually appears through weaker funding and higher future contributions. But moving to an extremely conservative assumption is not painless either. A lower discount rate increases the reported value of liabilities and can cause required contributions to rise sharply. That may provide a more cautious measurement of the promise, but it can also place immediate pressure on public budgets and taxpayers. The correct debate is therefore not between optimism and panic. It is about selecting assumptions that are defensible, transparent, and appropriate for the plan's investment strategy and financial support. Assumptions should not be chosen because they produce the most politically convenient contribution. They should be chosen because they represent a credible estimate of risk. Employers face similar pressures. Private companies that still sponsor defined benefit pensions must manage contributions that can change with interest rates, investment performance, workforce demographics, and federal funding rules. A company may find itself directing cash toward pension liabilities created decades earlier. That cash cannot simultaneously be used for wages, hiring, equipment, research, debt reduction, or expansion. Legacy pension costs can therefore influence business decisions even when the current workforce no longer participates in the old plan. If a private single-employer pension plan terminates without enough money, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation may take responsibility for covered benefits. PBGC is a federal corporation that insures many private defined benefit plans. In fiscal year 2025, it paid monthly benefits, subject to legal limits, to nearly 926,000 retirees from more than 5,000 failed single-employer plans. That protection is important, but it is not a promise that every participant will receive every dollar originally expected. PBGC guarantees are limited by law. The amount protected can depend on the year the plan terminates, the participant's age when benefits begin, the form of payment, how long certain benefit increases were in effect, and other plan details. Benefits above the legal guarantee may be reduced. And PBGC generally does not insure ordinary 401k account losses or state and local government pensions. A private pension covered by PBGC is therefore protected differently from a public pension backed by a state or city. It is also protected differently from a 401k, where the participant generally owns the account assets but carries more of the investment risk. For 401k savers, one of the greatest dangers arrives near the beginning of retirement. It is called sequence of returns risk. Imagine two retirees who earn the same average investment return over 20 years. One experiences strong gains early and losses later. The other experiences major losses immediately after retiring and gains later. If both are withdrawing money for living expenses, their outcomes can be dramatically different. The retiree suffering early losses must sell more assets at depressed prices to fund the same spending. Those assets are no longer present when the market recovers. A long-term average return cannot undo withdrawals made during the decline. Fees create another quiet risk. A fraction of a percentage point may appear insignificant in a single year. Compounded over several decades, it can reduce retirement wealth materially. The same is true of poor asset allocation, emotional selling during market declines, excessive concentration in employer stock, or the assumption that recent market performance will continue indefinitely. A 401k gives workers control and portability. It can also expose them to decisions that professional pension institutions employ entire departments to manage. Longevity adds one more uncertainty. No retiree knows exactly how long the money must last. Spending too cautiously can diminish life unnecessarily. Spending too quickly can create hardship at an age when work is no longer realistic. This is why America's retirement problem is not merely a shortage of money. It is fragmentation. A worker's future may depend on whether the employer is public or private, whether the job is covered by Social Security, whether the worker remains long enough to vest, whether the state strongly protects accrued pension benefits, whether the employer makes required contributions, whether investment assumptions prove realistic, whether the plan provides inflation protection, whether a private pension is covered by PBGC, and whether the full benefit falls within its guarantee, whether the worker has access to a good 401k, whether that plan has reasonable fees, whether markets fall just before retirement, whether the worker remains healthy, and whether retirement lasts 10 years or 40. There are, however, examples of stronger pension management. Better governed systems do not rely on one miraculous investment strategy. They use disciplined contribution policies so required payments are made in strong and weak economic years. They publish clear financial and actuarial reports. They use realistic assumptions and explain when those assumptions change. They diversify investments rather than betting the fund on a single market outcome. They disclose fees and conflicts. They separate professional investment decisions from political fundraising. They maintain independent oversight, beneficiary representation, external audits, and clear fiduciary duties. Some plans also use automatic risk-sharing mechanisms. Contributions, benefit adjustments, or cost of living increases may respond to the plan's financial condition according to rules established in advance. Such systems are not painless, but they reduce the temptation for lawmakers to ignore problems until a crisis forces sudden action. Ordinary Americans do not need to become pension actuaries, but they should understand what type of promise they have. Social Security is not projected simply to vanish when reserves are depleted. Continuing tax revenue would still support most scheduled benefits, although not all of them under current projections if Congress failed to act. A public pension is not identical to a balance held in an individual bank account. Its protection depends on plan rules, funding, government contributions, investment performance, and state law. A private defined benefit pension may be insured by PBGC, but the guarantee has limits. A 401k is not a pension promise. It is an investment account whose final value and sustainable income remain uncertain. Inflation threatens all retirement income, although different benefits provide different levels of protection. Annual statements matter. Benefit formulas matter. Vesting rules matter. Cost of living provisions matter. Fees matter. Plan funding reports matter. The earnings record shown in a Social Security account matters. None of those documents can guarantee the future, but ignoring them does not make the future safer. Diversified retirement income is fundamentally different from trusting one promise completely. That does not mean abandoning Social Security, withdrawing pension money, or placing all savings in one supposedly safe asset. It means recognizing that every source of retirement income has its own failure point. A Churchillian strategic mind might demand three things from American leaders. Tell the public the truth before the reserves are exhausted. Reform the system before emergency reductions become the only options available. And punish every official, advisor, and intermediary who treats retirement money as political or personal property. He would likely reject both theatrical panic and comfortable denial. America's pensions are not all collapsing. Social Security is not about to disappear. Public retirement systems are not identical. And a funding shortfall does not mean that every benefit check will stop. But reassurance without reform is not responsibility. The task is not to frighten Americans into believing every pension is doomed. The task is to preserve retirement security while there is still time to make gradual choices instead of forced ones. Because a retirement benefit may appear as a figure on a government statement or a pension portal. Behind that figure is something far more important. It is a life measured in early mornings, night shifts, taxes paid from every paycheck, years spent in classrooms, patrol cars, factories, hospitals, fire stations, offices, and city streets. It represents birthdays missed because someone was working, bodies worn down by service, families built around the expectation that sacrifice today would create dignity tomorrow. America does not owe its citizens impossible arithmetic. It does owe them honest arithmetic. It owes them institutions governed for beneficiaries rather than political donors. It owes them assumptions designed to reveal reality rather than postpone it. It owes them reform before crisis. And it owes them the truth that no retirement promise becomes secure merely because politicians are afraid to discuss its cost. A nation proves its strength not only by the wealth it creates, it proves its strength by whether its longest promises can survive its shortest political ambitions.